I need to say this before I talk myself out of it again. Because that's what I've been doing for years now. Just editing the truth. Softening it. Rearranging it so I don't have to look at the parts that make me feel, I don't know, exposed, I guess. But the truth is, I don't think I was the victim. And that's not how I've been telling it. Not to my friends, not to my therapist at first, not to my own son. Especially not to him. He thinks he knows what happened. He doesn't. He knows the version I gave him. And I let him build his life around that version. That's the part that keeps me up at night. Not even what I did at the time. It's what I didn't fix after. Because I could have. I had chances. So many small, quiet chances where I could have just corrected it. Said, wait, no, that's not the full story. But I didn't. And now it's been so long that it feels heavier to undo than to carry. God, okay. I need to just go. If I stop, I'll start justifying it again. I always do that. I start explaining it in a way that makes me feel less responsible. Like, well, anyone in my position would have done the same, or it wasn't that bad, or no. No, I'm not doing that this time. His name is Tyler. He's 23 now. And we talk, technically. We do. Birthdays. Holidays. Those careful, polite phone calls where everything sounds fine. Normal. We talk about his job, the weather, whatever show everyone's watching. It's all very surface level. And then we hang up. And I just sit there holding my phone, staring at it like it might, I don't know, ring again and give me another chance. Because every time, I think the same thing. He has no idea. None. And the worst part is, I'm the reason he doesn't. But I can't start at the end. I've tried that before, even just in my own head, and it twists everything. Makes it look like something it wasn't. Or, no, that's not right, it makes it look simpler than it was. And it wasn't simple. So I have to go back. I was married for 16 years. To Ron. And I mean this, he was a good man. Not in that way people say it right before they tear someone apart. I mean it plainly. He was steady. Kind. Predictable in a way that felt safe. He loved Tyler in this easy way. Effortless. No second guessing, no overthinking. Just love. I envied that. Because my love for Tyler was different. It was intense. Tight. Like I was always bracing for something bad to happen. Like if I just paid enough attention, worried enough, planned enough, I could stop it. Ron used to say I loved Tyler like I was preparing for impact. And I'd laugh it off, but he wasn't wrong. We weren't poor. Not even close. We were what people call comfortable. I hate that word now. Comfortable means you're okay, technically. Bills paid. Maybe a vacation once a year. No emergencies until there are. But for me, comfortable always felt like it could disappear at any second. Because growing up, that's what it felt like. We didn't talk about money in my house, not directly. But it was always there, underneath everything. That quiet tension. That constant, low hum of not enough. And I told myself, swore, really, that my kid would never feel that. Never. So I compensated. Overcompensated, if I'm being honest. But back then, I didn't see it like that. I thought I was just being responsible. Careful. Tyler was smart. Really smart. The kind of kid teachers pull you aside about. Not in a bad way, in that, he has potential in a way that sounds like a compliment but feels like pressure. Because potential needs support. It needs resources. And resources cost money. And then, when Tyler was 14, Ron's hours got cut. Not fired. Just reduced. Restructured. That word again. And suddenly, just like that, we were down about 30% of our income. And I can't even explain how fast everything in me shifted. That hum? That childhood hum? It came back, loud. Like it had been waiting. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't sleep. I started doing math in my head constantly: groceries, bills, tuition, future, future, future. And instead of talking to Ron about it, I didn't say anything. Not really. I just handled it. Or at least, I told myself I was handling it. Because that's when I made the first decision. The one that, looking back now, that was the start. That was it. The first brick in something I didn't even realize I was building yet. I opened an account. And no, I didn't tell him. And at the time, I told myself that didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than I understood. And that's the thing, that's the moment I keep coming back to, over and over, because I didn't realize then what that choice was going to turn into. I really didn't. But that's when everything started to shift in a way I couldn't see yet, and couldn't undo later. It didn't feel like a big deal at first. That's the part that's hard to explain without sounding dishonest. Because if you look at it from the outside, it was a big deal. I can see that now. But at the time, it felt small. Practical. Almost responsible. It was just a savings account. In my name. That Ron didn't know about. And even saying it like that now, it sounds worse than it felt in the moment. Because I didn't wake up one day and think, I'm going to hide money from my husband. It wasn't like that. It was quieter. Slower. I told myself it was an emergency fund. That every family should have one. That it was smart, even necessary. And honestly, I still think having savings is smart. That part wasn't the problem. The problem was that I didn't tell him. I made that choice early, and then I just kept making it. At first, it was small amounts. $50. Maybe $100 if I could shift things around without it being obvious. I handled most of our finances anyway, bills, budgeting, all of it, so it was easy to adjust things. Not stealing. I need to be clear about that, because that's always where my brain tries to go to defend myself. We had joint money. I wasn't taking from him, not exactly. But I was taking from us. And I was doing it quietly. And once I started, it became routine. That's the scary part. It stopped feeling like a decision and started feeling like just another task. Pay the electric bill, move a little into savings, grocery list, just normal. Except it wasn't. And every once in a while, I'd think about telling Ron. I really would. There were moments, small ones, where we'd be sitting together, maybe after dinner, talking about finances in that general, surface way couples do, and I'd feel it. That little push. Like, say it now. Just tell him. And then something in me would pull back. I'd think, it's not a big deal. It's just temporary. I'll tell him when it's more substantial. When it actually matters. But then it became substantial. And I still didn't say anything. 3 years. That's how long it went on. 3 years of small decisions that added up into something, not small at all. By the time Tyler was 17, there was almost $40,000 in that account. 40,000. Even now, saying that number out loud, it makes my stomach drop a little. Because I knew. I had to know, on some level, that this wasn't just an emergency fund anymore. This was something else. Something I was protecting. And I kept telling myself it was for the family. For Tyler. For stability. And maybe part of that was true. But not all of it. I know, part of it was for me. For that feeling of control. That sense that no matter what happened, I had something that was just mine. Something no one else could mess up or take away or make decisions about without me. And I didn't question that enough. I didn't ask myself why I needed that level of separation inside a marriage that, on the surface, was fine. Because it was fine. That's what makes this harder to sit with. There wasn't some huge breakdown at the time. No screaming matches, no obvious fractures. We were good. Stable. The kind of couple people assume is solid. And maybe that's why I got comfortable with the secret. Because nothing was forcing it into the open. Until something did. Ron had a friend. Mark. College friend. The kind of friend who drifts in and out over the years but never fully disappears. And one day, Ron came home talking about this opportunity. A business thing. Some kind of food truck partnership. I didn't even fully understand it at the time, and honestly, I didn't try very hard to. Because what mattered, what hit me, wasn't the details. It was what he'd already done. He invested $8,000 of our money. Without telling me. I remember the exact moment I found out. Not the date, but the feeling. That sharp, immediate drop in my chest. Like missing a step on the stairs. $8,000. Gone. No conversation. No heads up. Nothing. And I lost it. I mean that. I didn't just get upset. I exploded. It was like every fear I'd been carrying, every bit of anxiety about money and security and control, it all just came pouring out at once. I sat him down and I said things like betrayal and a violation and how could you not tell me? And every word felt justified. It was a betrayal. It was a violation of our partnership. You don't make that kind of decision alone. You just don't. But here's the part one didn't say. Not then. Not for years. While I was sitting there, furious about $8,000. There was $40,000 in an account with my name on it that he didn't know existed. And I didn't say a word about it. Not even a hint. I let the entire conversation center on what he had done. And Ron, because he's Ron, he apologized. Fully. Immediately. No defensiveness, no excuses. He said he was wrong, that he should have talked to me, that it wouldn't happen again. And I accepted that. I accepted his apology and let myself feel righteous. Like I was the one who had been wronged. And for a while, that felt clean. Simple. But underneath all that anger, there was something else. Something quieter. Something I didn't want to look at. Because I think, deep down, I knew. I knew I wasn't standing on solid ground. I knew there was something I wasn't saying that would change the entire conversation if I did. And instead of letting that realization push me toward honesty, it pushed me in the opposite direction. I got defensive. Not out loud. Not in a way anyone could point to. But internally, I started holding on to that moment. That mistake he made. Like proof. Like leverage. Because as long as he was the one who had crossed a line, I didn't have to explain why I had been crossing one for years. And I didn't realize it at the time, not fully, but that shift? That quiet, internal shift? That's when things between us stopped being as simple as they looked. That's when I started building something I couldn't easily take apart. And I didn't understand it then, but I was already setting the stage for what would come later. And what came later was a lot harder to justify. We stayed married for another 4 years after that. And if you had looked at us from the outside, you wouldn't have seen anything wrong. That's the part that still confuses me sometimes. How something can be so off underneath and still look completely fine on the surface. We were those people. You know the kind. The couple at neighborhood cookouts who stand a little too comfortably next to each other. Who laugh at the same moments, finish each other's sentences, share inside jokes that make everyone else smile politely. We looked solid. And I think, for a long time, I let that image do a lot of work for me. If everything looked okay, then maybe it was okay. Or at least, okay, enough. But inside, something had shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. It was more like a quiet rearranging. Like furniture being moved in the dark. You don't notice it immediately, but eventually you start bumping into things. I kept the account. Of course I did. And not only that, I kept adding to it. Still small amounts, still careful, still justifiable if you didn't look too closely. But now there was something different underneath it. Before, it had felt like protection. Preparation. Now it felt like insurance. Not just against financial trouble. Against everything. And I hate saying that. I really do. Because it makes it sound like I didn't trust my own marriage. And maybe that's exactly what it was, even if I wouldn't have admitted it then. I told myself it was just being cautious. But cautious and distant can start to look a lot alike after a while. And Ron, I don't think he fully knew. Not in a conscious way. But I think he felt something. There were moments. Small ones. He'd ask if I was okay, and I'd say yes, a little too quickly. Or he'd suggest we look at finances together, and I'd brush it off, say I had it handled. Which I did, technically. I did have it handled. Just not in a way that included him. And he trusted me. That's the part that I keep coming back to. He trusted me completely with that part of our life. Not because he didn't care, but because he believed I was good at it. That I had it under control. And I did. I just wasn't honest about how. And the thing is, I didn't feel like a dishonest person. I didn't walk around thinking, I'm lying to my husband. That's not how it felt from the inside. It felt like I was managing things. Protecting us. Protecting Tyler. Always Tyler. Everything came back to him in my head. His future, his opportunities, his stability. I built entire arguments in my mind about how what I was doing was actually for him. That one day, he'd benefit from it. And maybe he did. That's the uncomfortable part. It's not black and white. Some of what I did help. But that doesn't make it clean. It just makes it harder to untangle. By the time Tyler was in college, that account had already become something else. Not just a safety net. More like a parallel system. A second version of our finances that only I could see clearly. And when it came time to pay for his education, that's when I really started bending the truth. We paid for most of it. Tuition, housing, all of it. And Ron would ask questions, of course. Normal questions. Are we okay, covering this? Where exactly is this coming from? And I'd answer. Just not, precisely. I'd say things like, we've been saving, which was true. Or, I sold some stock, which was also true. I had sold some stock at one point. I just let that explanation carry more weight than it should have. I kept the details vague. And Ron didn't push. He trusted me. God, that word again. He trusted me to manage it, to make sure everything added up, to not put us in a bad position. And I didn't. We were fine. We stayed stable. Tyler graduated without debt. On paper, everything worked. But that's what makes this so complicated to admit out loud. Because if you only look at the outcome, it almost looks like I did the right thing. And I've used that argument before. I've leaned on it. Well, Tyler got through school, or we were financially secure, or nothing bad actually happened. But something did happen. It just wasn't visible. It was quieter than that. It was the distance I was building without saying it. The way I kept one part of my life completely separate from the person I was supposed to share everything with. The way I started thinking in terms of mine and his instead of ours. And I didn't realize how much that mattered until later. Until things started to crack in a way I couldn't ignore. Tyler graduated when he was 21. And that should have been, I don't know, a high point. A moment where everything we'd worked for came together. And in some ways, it was. We were proud. Of course we were. I was proud. But even then, even in that moment, there was this undercurrent. This quiet awareness that things between Ron and me weren't as solid as they looked. We still functioned well. Still talked, still laughed, still did all the things couples do. But there was something missing. Or maybe not missing. Maybe just buried. And I think Ron felt it too. Because not long after Tyler graduated, things started to shift in a way that couldn't be smoothed over with normal conversation or routine. At first, it was subtle. Ron staying later at work. Not dramatically later, just enough that it became noticeable. A little more distracted when he was home. On his phone more often, but not in a way that felt obvious or secretive. Just present but not fully present. And I noticed. Of course I noticed. I notice everything. But instead of asking directly, instead of sitting down and saying, "Hey, something feels off, what's going on?" I did what I always did. I watched. I analyzed. I built quiet theories in my head. And underneath all of that, there was this feeling I didn't want to name. Because naming it would have meant acknowledging something bigger than just him being distracted. It would have meant looking at the space between us. The one I had been quietly creating for years. And I wasn't ready to do that. So I ignored it. At least at first. But ignoring something doesn't make it go away. It just gives it time to grow into something harder to ignore later. And when I finally did see what was actually happening, I reacted in a way that, at the time, felt completely justified. Completely clear. But looking back now, I think that moment says more about me than I wanted to believe. What actually happened is, I found out about her. And even now, saying that, I feel that same tightness in my chest. Like my body remembers before my mind even catches up. She worked with him. Same office. I don't even remember how I first noticed. No, that's not true. I do remember, I don't like admitting how much I had already been watching. There were messages. Nothing explicit. Nothing you could point to and say, "This is an affair." That would have almost been easier. Cleaner. It was conversations. Frequent. Familiar. A tone that felt, I don't know, close. Too close. Inside jokes. Check-ins that didn't seem work-related. That kind of steady attention that builds over time. And I remember sitting there, looking at his phone, and thinking. There it is. Like I had been waiting for something, and now I finally had it. And that thought, that immediate sense of confirmation, it should have told me something about where I was already at. But it didn't. Or maybe it did, and I ignored it. Because what I felt in that moment wasn't confusion. It was certainty. Anger, yes. Hurt, definitely. But underneath all of that, certainty. Like everything suddenly made sense. Like all the distance, all the small shifts I had been noticing, all the things I hadn't wanted to name, suddenly they had a reason. And that reason wasn't me. That's the part one held on to. I confronted him. Not calmly. Not carefully. I didn't ease into it or ask questions. I went straight to it. Accusation, anger, all of it. And Ron, he didn't deny it. That's important. He didn't try to twist it or minimize it in that moment. He admitted that he'd been talking to her. That they'd gotten close. That it hadn't been physical, but that he knew it wasn't appropriate. And I believed him. I still do, actually. I don't think it ever crossed that line physically. But emotionally? Yeah, it did. And that was enough. More than enough. I remember saying things like, "You betrayed me," and "How could you do this after everything?" And I meant it. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't acting. I was genuinely hurt. But here's the part that's hard to sit with now. I never once, in that entire confrontation, thought about what I had been doing. Not once. It didn't even cross my mind in a real way. I didn't think, well, I've been hiding something too. I didn't think, maybe we've both been distant. I didn't think anything that complicated the narrative that was unfolding in that moment. I was the one who had been wronged. He was the one who had crossed a line. And that clarity, it felt almost like relief. Because suddenly, everything was simple. There was a reason for the distance. There was a clear line between right and wrong. And I was on the right side. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Looking back now, I think part of me needed it to be that simple. Because if it wasn't, if I had allowed even a little bit of complexity into that moment, I would have had to look at myself too. And I wasn't ready for that. So I didn't. I ended the marriage. Quickly. Decisively. There wasn't a long, drawn-out process of trying to fix things. There wasn't counseling, no real attempt to rebuild. I made the decision, and I stuck to it. And everyone around me understood. Of course they did. From the outside, it looked straightforward. Husband gets emotionally involved with another woman, wife finds out, marriage ends. Clean. Understandable. Sympathetic, even. And I let it stay that way. I didn't offer any additional context. I didn't complicate the story. I didn't say, well, actually, there's more to this. I let people see exactly what they expected to see. And then, there was Tyler. He was 21. Old enough to understand, but still my son. And I remember that conversation so clearly. Not every word, but the feeling of it. The way I sat him down, the way my voice shook just enough to feel real, but not so much that I couldn't stay in control of what I was saying. And I told him. I told him that his father had emotionally cheated on me. Which was true. That part was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. And I knew that, even as I was saying it. There were moments in that conversation where I could have, I don't know, widened the frame a little. Said something like, it's more complicated than that, or, there were issues on both sides. But I didn't. I kept it clean. Clear. Simple. Your father crossed a line. And I'm leaving because of it. And Tyler, he believed me. Of course he did. Why wouldn't he? I was his mother. I was sitting there, emotional but composed, giving him a version of events that made sense. That fit into a narrative people understand. And he didn't question it. He didn't dig deeper or ask for more context. He just accepted it. And something shifted in him after that. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But enough. He pulled away from Ron. Not completely. He didn't cut him off or anything like that. But the relationship changed. It became thinner. More careful. Less open. And I saw that happening. I noticed it in the way they talked, in the way Tyler referred to him, in the way their interaction started to feel slightly formal. And I let it happen. I didn't correct it. I didn't step in and say, hey, this is more complicated than you think. I let him be angry on my behalf. I let him take my version of the story and build his relationship with his father around it. And Ron. God. Ron never told him. Not once. He never came to Tyler and said, there's more to this. He never tried to defend himself by exposing me. He just accepted the distance. He stayed quiet. He kept his dignity. And I didn't. Not in the same way. Because even though I didn't actively turn Tyler against him, I also didn't stop it. And there's a difference. A big one. I told myself at the time that I was just being honest. That I was sharing what happened. That Tyler deserved to know. And he did deserve to know. Just, not like that. Not half of it. Not the version that made me look clean and Ron look like the only one who broke something. Because that wasn't the truth. It was a version of the truth. A strategically incomplete one. And I think, deep down, I knew that even then. I just didn't want to deal with what would happen if I opened it up any further. Because once you start telling the full truth, you don't get to control how people see you anymore. And I wasn't ready for that. I chose the version that protected me. And I told myself it was enough. But it wasn't. It never really was. And I didn't realize how much that choice would echo until much later. After the divorce, everything got quieter. Not better. Not worse, exactly. Just quieter in that way life does when something big ends and you're left with whatever's left of it. Tyler moved into his own place not long after. First job, small apartment, that whole transition into adulthood that should have felt, I don't know, hopeful. And it did. For him, I think. For me, it felt like space. Too much space. Because when he was home, when Ron was still there, when everything was still, structured, I didn't have to sit with things for very long. There was always something to do, something to manage, someone to take care of. But suddenly, it was just me. And my thoughts got louder. At first, I leaned into the version of the story I had already built. That I had done the right thing. That I had left a marriage where I had been betrayed. That I had protected myself, protected my son, made a hard but necessary decision. And people reinforced that. Friends, family, they all responded the same way. Supportive. Sympathetic. You did what you had to do. You were strong. You didn't deserve that. And I accepted that. I let it settle around me like, I don't know, like a blanket. Something warm that kept me from feeling the colder parts underneath. But it didn't fully stick. Because there were moments, small ones at first, where something didn't quite line up. Like when Tyler would mention Ron in that slightly distant way. Not angry, not emotional, just detached. Careful. Or when I'd see them together at holidays. The way their conversations felt, measured. Like both of them were choosing their words more than they used to. And every time I noticed it, there was this flicker of something in me. Not guilt exactly. Not right away. More like discomfort. Like something wasn't sitting right, but I didn't want to poke at it too much. Because I knew if I did, it would lead somewhere I wasn't ready to go. And for a long time, I didn't. I stayed in the version of events that made the most sense. The one that kept everything clean and understandable. Until I couldn't anymore. It was about 2 years after the divorce when I finally told my therapist. Not the version I had been telling everyone else. The real version. All of it. The account. The money. The years of not saying anything. The way I had framed everything for Tyler. And I remember sitting there after I said it, just waiting. Waiting for her to respond. To correct me. To reassure me. To say something that would make it feel less heavy. But she didn't. She just let it sit. And that silence, it was uncomfortable. More uncomfortable than if she had said something immediately. Because it forced me to stay with it. To actually feel the full weight of what I had just said out loud. I think I needed that. Even though I didn't want it. And then she asked me something. It was such a simple question. But it stayed with me in a way I didn't expect. She said, "What are you most afraid Tyler would think if he knew all of this?" And I answered quickly. Too quickly. I said that I was calculating. That I had been manipulating things. That I had known exactly what I was doing the whole time and just chosen it anyway. And even as I said it, I felt this resistance. Like part of me didn't agree. So she asked, "Do you think that's true?" And I said no. Immediately. But then, I don't know, something shifted. Because right after that, I said, "I don't know." And that, I don't know, felt more honest than the no. And then I cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just, quietly. The kind of crying that feels like something is loosening inside you that's been tight for a long time. Because the truth is, I don't think I was calculating. I don't think I was sitting there years ago thinking, I'm going to build this secret system and use it later if things go wrong. That's not how it felt. It felt like fear. Old fear. The kind that doesn't feel like a choice when you're in it. It just feels like survival. I think I was shaped by that, by growing up with that constant sense of not enough. And I carried it into my marriage without fully realizing how much it was influencing me. I loved Ron. I did. But I never fully trusted the ground under us. So I built something separate. Something I could stand on if everything else gave way. And when things did start to break, I grabbed onto the part that made me the victim. I held onto it tightly. Because it was easier. Cleaner. Safer. But here's the part I've had to sit with. Acting out of fear doesn't erase the impact of what you do. It doesn't make it harmless. I hurt Ron. I hurt Tyler. And I did it while believing, at least partially, that I was doing the right thing. That's the part that's hardest to reconcile. Because it means I can't just separate myself into a good or bad. I have to sit in that middle space where both things are true at once. And that's uncomfortable. It still is. I still have the account, by the way. It's different now. After the divorce, everything was separated, restructured. It's just mine. Clean. Legitimate. Nothing hidden. But even now, I can't bring myself to put everything in one place. I still keep things slightly divided. And I've asked myself why. Over and over. What would it take for me to feel safe enough to not do that? And I don't have a clear answer. I don't know if it's something that can be fully unlearned. Or if it's just part of me now. And then there's Tyler. We're not estranged. That's important to say. We talk. We see each other. There's still love there, clearly. But there's also something else. Like a thin layer of glass between us. Not obvious. Not something you could point to in a single moment. But it's there. I feel it. In the pauses. In the way he sometimes chooses his words carefully. In the way our conversations stay just slightly, surface level, even when they don't have to. And sometimes I wonder. Does he know? Not the specifics. But does he sense something? That the story he was given isn't complete? He's smart. He's always been smart. And I've caught myself, more than once, listening to him on those birthday calls, noticing the way he hesitates for just a second longer than he used to, and thinking. Maybe he already feels it. Maybe he just doesn't have the language for it. And that thought, it doesn't comfort me. It makes everything feel more fragile. Because if he already senses something is off, then what happens if I actually say it out loud? And that's the question I keep circling. The one I haven't been able to answer. And the more I think about it, the less clear it becomes. I keep going back and forth on it. It's been, 2 years now since I first said all of this out loud in that room with my therapist? And I still haven't landed anywhere solid. Some days I wake up and I think, of course I have to tell him. It feels obvious. Almost urgent. Like, how can you build a real relationship with someone when there's something this big sitting underneath everything? Something unspoken but still, present. I think about honesty. About what it actually means. Not the version I used to tell myself, the selective kind, the kind that shares just enough to feel truthful without actually being fully transparent. Real honesty. And when I think about it like that, it feels like I owe him the truth. Not just pieces of it. Not the version that protects me. All of it. Because he's not a kid anymore. He's 23. He's built his own life, his own sense of the world. And part of that world, part of how he sees relationships, trust, even his own father, is based on something I gave him that wasn't complete. And that matters. It should matter. But then. Other days, it feels completely different. I think, what am I actually doing if I tell him now? Because it's not just information. It's not just, hey, here's something you didn't know. It would change things. It would change how he sees me. How he sees his father. Maybe even how he sees himself, his childhood, all of it. And for what? That's the question I can't get past. For what? So I can feel better? So I can finally put down this weight I've been carrying? Because if that's the reason, then it starts to feel selfish. Like I'd be taking something that's been mine to deal with and handing it to him. Saying, here, now you carry this too. And calling that honesty. I don't know if that's fair. I really don't. Because right now, as things are, he has a version of the story that, while incomplete, is stable. It makes sense to him. It allows him to have a relationship with both of us, even if it's a little strained. It's functional. And if I take that and pull it apart, what happens then? Does it actually help anything? Or does it just create more confusion, more distance, more damage? I go in circles with it. Constantly. And I still don't have an answer that feels right. Not completely. What I do know is that I'm tired of pretending, even just in my own head, that what I did was simple. It wasn't. I wasn't just the victim. But I also wasn't some cold, calculating person who set out to manipulate everything either. I was both less and more than that. I was someone who was scared in a way that felt very old. Someone who loved her son so much that it turned into something tighter. More controlling than I ever intended. Someone who loved her husband, but never quite trusted that love to be enough to keep things steady. And none of that stopped me from making choices that hurt people. That's the part one can't soften anymore. I hurt Ron. Not just by ending the marriage, that part, I can still understand, even if it wasn't handled perfectly. But by not being honest long before that. By building something separate and never giving him the chance to be part of it. And I hurt Tyler. That one sits differently. Because he didn't have a choice. He just believed what I gave him. And I let him. I let him build a version of his father in his mind that wasn't entirely fair. Not entirely accurate. And I didn't correct it. Even when I had time. Even when I had space. Even when there was no immediate reason not to, other than. I didn't want to deal with what it would mean for me. That's the part I'm most ashamed of. Not the account. Not even the divorce. It's that moment, or really, all those moments, where I could have chosen to be fully honest. And I didn't. I chose myself. Over him. Over clarity. Over truth. And I kept choosing it. In small ways. Quiet ways. The kind that are easy to justify in the moment and harder to look at later. My therapist asked me something once. She said, what would you say to him if you knew he would understand? If you knew it wouldn't change how he sees you? And I didn't hesitate. I said, I would tell him that I'm more complicated than he thinks I am. That the story I gave him wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. And that his father. I'd tell him his father is a better man than I made him seem in the worst moments. That he made a mistake, yes. But that he also showed restraint, dignity, even kindness, in the way he handled everything afterward. More than I did, in some ways. And I'd tell Tyler that the thing I regret most isn't what happened between me and Ron. It's what happened between me and him because of how I handled it. The distance. The carefulness. That glass wall I feel every time we talk. I'd tell him I see it. I feel it. And I know, at least partly, where it came from. And then. I don't know. I don't know what I'd expect from him after that. Forgiveness? Understanding? Maybe nothing. Maybe just the truth existing between us, for once. But that's in a world where I know how it ends. And I don't. In the real world, I don't know how he'd react. I don't know if it would bring us closer or push us further apart. I don't know if it would help him or hurt him. And that uncertainty, it keeps me where I am. Stuck between wanting to be honest and being afraid of what honesty will cost. I'm 45 years old. And I still don't fully understand myself. That's the part one didn't expect. I thought by this age things would feel clearer. More settled. That I'd know, instinctively, what the right thing to do is. But I don't. I just know what I've done. And I know I can't undo it. I can only decide what to do next. And somehow, that feels just as hard. Tyler will probably never see this. He doesn't watch things like this. He's not the type. But if somehow he did. If he heard this version instead of the one I gave him years ago. I don't know exactly what I'd want him to take from it. Maybe just this. That I didn't mean to give him a partial map and let him believe it was complete. But I did. And I'm still trying to figure out what to do with that. And the truth is, I haven't figured it out yet. And I don't know when, or if, I will.